I'm not even gonna lie. I've read the first 200 pages in a day, and if I didn't have to go to work, I probably would have finished this in a single day. The girl with the dragon tattoo is, it's amazing. I've wanted to read it for a long time. I've been curious, right? And it didn't disappoint. Now, I have to say this, it isn't the greatest page turner ever, but it keeps you immersed. It keeps you invested. Stieg Larsson does something here that's great. All right, he uses simple language, simple words, and you're just, the pages keep on flying by. What I'm saying is that reading this, there's a flow. It just flows, right? There really aren't any moments in this book that seem that they're filler-ish. There aren't any sections in this book that seem like a drag, that seem like a chore to read, right? If it isn't something to do with the plot, then we are blessed with characters. And of course, we have our two main characters, Lisbeth and Mikhail, and they're just so interesting, right? The whole, Winterstrom plot line at the beginning, which sort of propels Mikhail into doing this investigation. I don't really care for it, right? This Winterstrom affair is a vehicle so that Michael can go to this island and, research the Vanger family and, investigate the disappearance of, a girl, Harriet Vanger, who just simply vanished in thin air and nobody knows how. And it's been almost 40 years, and her uncle, I think he is, Heinrich, he has been getting, these pressed flowers for nearly 40 years on his birthday, and he has been tormented, and it's just such a strong opening, right? There's just such a mystery. You're so curious, and you think to yourself, this killer who abducted and, murdered Harriet, he's tormenting this old man for 40 years by giving him flowers on his birthday to remember, that horrible day, right? And it's such sadism if you think about it. And I got hooked immediately, right? Now, the problem is that I was so hyped that I had, almost astronomical expectations. I thought that these final revelations would be fucking crazy. I really, this doesn't really happen that often with me while reading a book, but I had some crazy expectations. I thought that when we finally get to the ending, I'm gonna get my mind blown with this fucking massive conspiracy, right? Because I thought, this is not just about some girl that disappeared. This is big, right? Unfortunately, it wasn't so. The revelations in of themselves at the end, of course, they're of course quality. They're up to a caliber, right? But it isn't what I expected, which is fine, right? What we have at the end, after all of this crazy, investigation with Mikhail and Lisbeth, what we really have here is a dysfunctional family that's rich, and, a member of this family, Gottfried, which is, I think, one of Heinrich's brothers. This guy, he was fucking nuts. Like, he was fucking cuckoo. He was a serial killer in the 50s and 60s, and he had two children, Martin and Harriet. Harriet being the one who disappeared mysteriously, and Martin is the one who is now the CEO of the Vanger, empire. Of course, the revelation is, Gottfried. Not only was he a serial killer, not only was he, a serial rapist, but he, let's just say he abused his two children, Martin and Harriet, and for whatever fucking reason, and he taught his son Martin to be like him, to be a psychopath, to be a serial killer, to be a rapist, to hate women, whatever. And Martin, he just, adapted to it like it ain't no biggie. Like, to me, it seems like Martin has been indoctrinated by his father Gottfried, and he just accepted it like his duty, right? So not only was this guy killing, raping, but he was teaching his son to do this, and guess what? He was also sexually abusing his two kids, Harriet and Martin. Like, this guy just can't stop. Right? He is the lowest of the low, trash, the pinnacle of trash. That boy, listen, Gottfried Vanger deserves the qualification. That boy just ain't right. Right? And I have a single problem with Stieg Larsson here, what he does, because, he weaves this plot of red herrings. You might think that Harold Vanger, the oldest of the brothers, is, might be involved because he was a Nazi, he's nasty, he's mean, he's a recluse. Who knows, right? You think this guy, there's something wrong with this guy, right? And then you have Isabella Vanger, who was Gottfried's wife. And she's a nasty piece of work too. Immediately, the reader doesn't like her at all, of course, for obvious reasons, and you think, this bitch might be involved as well. And then we finally find out that Isabella, the wife of Gottfried the monster, the mother of Martin and Harriet, she knew what our boy Gottfried was up to, and she didn't give a shit. Like, Isabella deserves Mother of the Year, Mother of the Century. She just didn't give two shits, right? It's so fascinating, right? She just didn't care. She just lived her life, and this dude, wow, right? But here's what I have a problem with Stieg Larsson. He does not explain what has led Gottfried Vanger to be this way. There is absolutely no clue, there is no hint, there is no subtle remark at all, right? The only explanation is that he was always sick in the head. He joined the Nazi party, blah, blah, blah. And then after that, in the 50s and 60s, he just kept on killing and raping. Right? Which is, I guess, you want to be mysterious about it, whatever, but, I would have loved a bit of a revelation, right? And when it comes to Martin Vanger, like, he says, it was my duty towards my father, Gottfried, and he just accepted it, he accepted being abused, as his, duty as a son. He was brainwashed, whatever. He might have a proclivity to being a psychopath because of his wonderful father, right? So Gottfried, brainwashed this little kid, and Martin followed in the footsteps of his father. So we kind of understand why Martin became the monster that he was. But in terms of his father, there is no real clue. There is no real say or remark as to why he became this terrible monster, who did. And another thing, another little thing, a little critique, like there is this overarching religious plot line, if you want to call it, that Gottfried Wenger, he killed all of these women, and he kind of put their bodies in a sort of religious remark to, various parts of the Bible. And we don't really know why this is. It's kind of hinted at, Mikhail kind of says that this is a sort of parody or caricature of the Bible, certain Bible verses, but we don't really find out why. And even Martin doesn't really explain why this is, why his father, put his victims in these positions of Bible, parodies. It's simply just left as it is. And I would have loved, what's the word I'm looking for? I wanted a bit of a revelation as to why this is. It's never explained why Gottfried was obsessed with these religious, Bible caricatures, right? Now we will engage in a section that I like to call, my tinfoil hat speculations, because while I was reading this, I had a few theories and a few conspiracy theories and a few speculations that I'm so sad that they didn't turn out to be true. So, somewhere in the book, while Mikhail is doing the investigation by himself before Elizabeth comes along, while reading, Officer Morell's, reports, it is concluded that Morell had the speculation that the accident on the bridge had something to do with, Harriet's disappearance, right? But Mikhail, he dismisses it, right? And while I'm reading this, right, I'm thinking to myself, hold on a minute. You see, I had my tinfoil hat was already vibrating. I was on a roll, and I was thinking, hold on a minute. I was thinking, what if the accident on the bridge on that island, that distracted everybody, that caught everybody's attention, those two trucks with, gasoline or oil or whatever, they crashed, and they fucking barred, transportation, so nobody could come in and nobody could leave the island, right? And this accident on the bridge isolated the island and caused a big ruckus. It was a massive distraction. And I was thinking, like, what if the accident was intentional and premeditated to distract everybody so that the killer could snatch Harriet and bounce? Like, I would have loved for this to be revealed, by Stieg Larsson, but it didn't happen, unfortunately. That would have been the cherry on top of the cake. But it didn't happen, right? It didn't happen. I was thinking, what if the killer, which obviously had to be a member of the Vanger family, of course, right? Who else could do all of this and get away with it? I was thinking, what if the killer somehow blackmailed one of the drivers? Maybe the driver was in debt, and, the killer blackmailed the driver to cause an accident, and this would, clear all the debts. It would have been a fascinating puzzle piece, right? But it didn't happen. It would have been a lovely conspiracy, but it didn't happen. I would have loved for it to happen. Like, can you imagine somebody actually premeditated this accident to get rid of Harriet? And this also leads to the question, what the fuck did Harriet do, or what the fuck did she know that somebody really had to make her disappear, right? And here is another speculation that I had on that tinfoil vibe. I was thinking, like, who else could be the murderer, right? And I was thinking, like, a real fucking massive, revelation would have been, what if Henrik Vanger himself was the fucking killer? That would have been fucking glorious, right? Because listen. I was thinking in my conspiracy head, I was thinking, what if old man Henrik Vanger, he killed Harriet, his niece, made her disappear, and now 40 years later, he hired Mikael to do this investigation because he is so sick in the head, so proud of himself, so narcissistic, this old man. He thinks that he committed the perfect crime, so now he is hiring a competent journalist in order to brag and rub it in everybody's nose that he cannot be caught, that he has left no traces behind, and he's so sadistic that he has sent himself all of these gifts of flowers over the years, because he's sick in the head. That would have been like so crazy. I would have loved to see this twist. Like, who is the killer? The guy who actually started this investigation, Henrik Vanger. That would have been phenomenal. This old man who seems devastated that his favorite niece, disappeared, and he's hiring this journalist, and all the while he's doing this, being the killer, because he gets some sick pleasure out of it, right? Because he knows that he cannot be caught, right? But, it's just a fantasy of mine that I would have loved to see this. Moving on, and before moving on, here is why I initially suspected Henrik Vanger himself of being the killer, because of course this book is all about, violence against women, sexual assault against women, etc. And if you were paying attention, Henrik Vanger mentions a couple of times that Harriet was his favorite niece. They were close, they had a bond, they had a connection, and Henrik mentions that they had, and I quote, a special relationship. And a couple of times Henrik, emphasizes this, that he and his niece had a special relationship. And I was thinking in my head, I was like, bro, is this guy hinting that he was, abusing his niece, right? On some creepy old man bullshit? Like, this is what I thought at first. This was my assumption. Like, this guy, he keeps on mentioning how close he was to Harriet, and he is obsessed with this investigation, finding out he has crazy research. He's got a mountain of files and dossiers, right? And I was thinking, hold up. This old man, he might have been a pervert. He might have been a pedophile, right? But it didn't happen. Henrik, to me, he was my prime suspect, okay? And it would have been a great twist if he were to be the real killer, right? Now, when it comes to our characters, Michael and Lisbeth, of course, Lisbeth is, of course, the fan favorite. If you read all of the praise on the back cover and on the first page or so, everybody keeps on, barking about what a phenomenal character Lisbeth Salander is. And of course she is, but I don't think a lot of readers give Mikael Blomvik I think that's how you pronounce his name. Nobody, not enough people give Mikhail enough credit. Okay, he is not an exaggerated character. He doesn't have crazy mannerisms. He's not super eccentric, whatever. He seems well adjusted, balanced. He seems like an average Joe with a talent for journalism, investigation, writing, etc. Right? But Michael, to me, is the linchpin in this novel. He keeps this novel together because even though he's kind of an average Joe, right? He's kind of commonplace. I'm still interested whenever he is on the page. I'm always interested in his thinking process. I'm always interested in his internal monologues. I love these little hints that Larsson makes about Mikhail. Mikhail has a couple of relations that are important to him, but he kind of takes them for granted. He kind of, treats them as commodities. His relationship with his daughter, for example, his relationship with his, lover slash colleague, Erica, his ex-wife is barely mentioned, etc. So, Mikhail is like a vanilla version of Lisbeth, right? Because he is a bit antisocial at times, especially when he does his research. He just isolates himself completely and he focuses on the task at hand, and you see, primarily at the end that he kind of feels bad. He's kind of guilty that he kind of forgot about his fucking daughter at the end. He kind of, somewhere in the book, he was a bit worried about his daughter because she was going on this religious trip in a camp, whatever, and he was kind of worried. And then he got, immersed in his research, and he kind of forgot about his fucking daughter for a year, right? But now, Lisbeth is, of course, the creme de la creme. She's so interesting. She's so fascinating. And she is, to me, in part, still a mystery, right? She is so like Lisbeth is a duality. Like, on one side, I love her dearly. She's so just, yeah, boy. She's a great protagonist. And on the other hand, boy, she's so annoying at times. Irritating. So irritating. I wouldn't call them tantrums, but her reactions to certain things, her way of handling, her relationship with Mikhail is so infuriating at times, right? But at the same time, I understand it is hinted at that something happened to her past, to her, that she had a fucking, she decided on certain things, and of course she may have mental illness or whatever. She has problems. She has issues. She has emotional problems. She's a recluse. She isolates herself. She's not social at all, right? She's introverted, whatever. And Larsson makes her like this, you love her, but you hate her. You hate her, but you love her, right? It's so amazingly well done, so well written, right? I wish that I could write a character like Lisbeth, because she's just this constant contradiction. She is this constant inconsistency, right? Obviously, something happened to her. Something so traumatic that she just became what she is today. And listen, I've already started reading the second book, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and the prologue is telling, is revealing. Okay, something happened in Elizabeth's past, and from the looks of it so far, I've only read a couple of pages. Elizabeth's past is fucked up. And I mean that it's fucked up, okay? And I can't wait to find out more because it's dark. It's fucking dark, right? Um, this is something that kind of irritated me throughout this book, which is Lisbeth's status, her situation, her social situation, if you would. I don't know the laws in Sweden, but Lisbeth, in this book, she's 24 years old. She's an adult. She's obviously, she's got her head together, even though she has issues. She is a functioning adult, and we find out that she always had guardians and protectors, throughout her life, because apparently the law or the committees of mental health or whatever, they categorized her as being a fucking retard throughout her life. Everybody thought that she's fucking dumber than a sack of bricks, even though she is obviously capable of taking care of herself and earning a living for herself. Like, she's 24 years old, an adult, and she still has a guardian, and that guardian is in charge of her finances. Because apparently she's so dumb and so retarded that the guardian has to manage her finances and her bank accounts and all of this, right? And the reason for this, the reason given, is apparently she can't manage her own life. But the proof is in the pudding. She pays her bills and taxes on time. She has her own place. She has a job. She earns her money. She buys her food. She kind of takes care of her health, I guess, a little bit. Her apartment is a pigsty, but you can't be perfect. So the proof is there that she can manage her own life perfectly, and yet the state, the government, the committees have all decided that she is fucking dumb and she needs a guardian to take care of her finances, even though it's obvious that she can pay her own bills and buy her own food. Like, all throughout this book, I was so angry at this fact, like the audacity of this government, right? To assume that because she's a bit antisocial, because she refuses to communicate with these robots in the system, all of a sudden, automatically, she's a fucking mental patient, right? It was so infuriating, and because of this, you kind of understand why Lisbeth has this animosity and hostility for the system, for the government, for the authorities. She fucking hates the police, and for good reason, right? Obviously, this is one of her mantras, one of her rules, that she will never ever, reach for the police, no matter what happens, even if it is between life and death. She will not reach out to the police, to the authorities, because she does not trust them. Obviously, for good reasons, right? When it comes to Lisbeth, obviously she has certain problems, certain issues, certain hang-ups because of her past, because of her trauma. But, I've never been impressed by people who make such a big deal about their image, about their fashion choices. I think this is a superficial nonsense. People who, dress a certain way, who have to make a statement through their wardrobe, it's not impressive. It's not interesting. It's banal, right? And it's a bit repulsive how a lot of the characters that interact with Lisbeth, they kind of view her as this fucking, I don't know, this mongrel, this barbarian, this savage, just because she dresses maybe in a punk or metalhead way. She has black clothes, they're ripped. She has piercings, she has tattoos, she has unconventional hairstyles, and of course, most of all, she's introverted. But this is regarding to, attire. Right? The fact that she presents herself this way leaves me completely indifferent, because I'm not interested in, mohawks and piercings and tattoos. And look at me, I'm making a statement with my clothes. It's completely irrelevant to me. I knew people who they belonged to certain subcultures and they dressed a certain way as a statement that they belonged to this group or that group. And they had mohawks and crazy piercings and tattoos, and it left me completely, empty, right? But of course, in Elizabeth's case, she dresses this way, not only because it's her choice, her preference, but she dresses in this way to repel other people, to make them stay away. The message is, I'm not like you, I'm a freak, stay away from me. This is her message through her fashion sense, right? Which is fine, I guess, right? Elizabeth herself views herself as a freak. She sees herself as this abomination of nature. She assumes that she isn't right, that she isn't normal like everybody else. Something's wrong with her. And a really, just a sweet thing that Larsson does here, her internal monologues are just so, they're just so, I wouldn't say cute, but they're so endearing, because a couple of times in this book, Elizabeth shows that she really has, a problem with how she looks. She doesn't like the way she looks. I don't know if it's body dysphoria, but she clearly isn't a fan of her body type, right? She says a couple of times she ain't got no ass, she ain't got no tits, she ain't got no curves, she ain't got no hips, and she says it, and she says it that people confuse her with a teenage boy, and a couple of people actually do confuse her with a teenage boy, because she ain't got the goodies. It's unfortunate, and it's so, what Stieg Larsson does here with showcasing this is that it's so natural. It flows so naturally. There's no bombastic nothing, right? It's just a person that has a problem with how she looks, and it's unfortunate that she is so down on herself. She can't trust people. She has a few friends, if you can call them that, but she doesn't trust people, period. And by the end, she is conflicted, because not only does she start to trust Mikhail, but she also falls in love with him for the first time. This is the first time she falls in love with anybody, and she's conflicted. She doesn't know how to react. She doesn't know how to behave, right? Larsson does this so wonderfully. It's like this is a genuine person having serious issues, because of her upbringing, because of her life experience. She is kind of stunted in a way in terms of relationships, in terms of knowing how to act in the presence of others. She doesn't know how to socialize. Not really. And she kind of cares for Mikhail, and she doesn't know what the fuck she's supposed to do, right? Larsson has written real people, and it's just so amazing, right? But when it comes to another character, I would have loved to see more from the character Armansky, I think his name is, which is Lisbeth's boss at Minos Security, I think. I mean, he's a wonderful character in of himself, but in this book, Larsson kind of puts him on the sidelines. Larsson doesn't use Armansky effectively. He introduces him, and you immediately fall in love with Armansky because he desperately wants to take care of Lisbeth. You know, he's kind of like a father figure, whatever. You know, you fall in love with him because he cares so much about Lisbeth, and he wants to help Lisbeth. But as you read along, you know, Armansky doesn't show up that often. He's kind of relegated to the background. And it's unfortunate because he is another extremely human character. You know, he is developed, he's rounded, and I would have loved to see more of him in the book. And I hope that he keeps on showing up in the other two books, okay? You know, and by the end, it turns out, you know, on one hand, it's this, that Gottfried was a fucking psycho and a sicko, and he was abusing his kids, and Martin became just like him, and both of them were abusing Harriet. And on that fatal day when that accident happened on the bridge, Harriet seized the moment, seized the chance, and got the fuck out of there, obviously, right? And she went to Australia, and then finally Michael finds her, and Heinrich and Harriet are finally reunited, whatever. But this is the deal. This is, you know, the fucking reveal. And I'm not trying to downplay it, but I was so overhyped. I thought this was much more. This was some crazy shit, and it is some crazy shit. But it's just like it's a couple of members of the family being fucked up and you know, sexual abuse, and she got out of there. You know, this is basically it. This is the main fucking plot, right? And as crazy as it is, I would have loved something more. You know, I don't know. I would have loved something more intricate, more complicated, even more fucking out of this world bananas, right? But anyway, but another, you know, slight complaint, you know, all of this abuse was happening to Harriet. She had had enough, and there was a moment when she wanted to confess to Heinrich. And Heinrich, unfortunately, didn't have the time. And, you know, and then Harriet vanishes. But, you know, I understand she was a teenager. She was, you know, she was despairing. She was, you know, crazy anxious. You know, she just wanted to get out of there to feel safe because she felt a constant state of fear. You know, I understand. But listen, all of this could have been avoided if she just insisted on telling, you know, Heinrich, the police, somebody, right? And she would have been safe, I think. Right? But, you know, if she did this, of course, then there would be no book trilogy. Or at least this book wouldn't be. Right? So the fact that she didn't insist on telling somebody, you know, it happened for the sake of plot convenience. Because otherwise there would be no girl with the dragon tattoo. Right? You know, and by the end, unfortunately, you know, repulsively, the Vanger family, mainly Heinrich and Harriet, decide to not reveal to the public, to the authorities, that, you know, Godfrey and Martin were serial killers. It is kept hush hush. It is kept secret, and you know, their victims, unfortunately, don't get the justice that they deserve. The Vanger family, you know, by the end, keeps their skeletons in the closet for the sake of their Vanger empire, their massive corporation. You know, which is unfortunate. But it shows, and this happens for a lot of reasons, mainly to keep Harriet from the limelight. It's done so that Harriet doesn't have to relive all of those horrific moments. I understand, but still, this is about two serial killers who had a lot of victims under their belts, and those cases haven't been resolved, and they decide to keep it hush hush. And Michael is furious about this, but he can't do shit about it, right? And this, showcases another major theme in Larsson's book, which is, on one side, of course, it's sexual assault and abuse, and on the other hand, it is the corruption of, capitalism, business, in all of its, in all of its aspects, right? Because at the end, we find out about the Wennerstrom affair, that it's an international crime syndicate, cartels, mafiosos, gangsters, human trafficking, arms dealing, drugs, who knows what else. So, it's basically business as usual, corruption on a global scale, nothing new under the sun, right? And I think I'll end it with this. Even though, we're all in love with Elizabeth, I guess, we like her as a character, even though she is this contradiction, this constant inconsistency, she has her problems. At the end, she kind of gets angry that Mikhail, I still don't know how to pronounce his name, Mikhail, decides to spend his time with Erica, he's his longtime lover. And Elizabeth gets upset, for obvious reasons, right? She finally fell in love with somebody, and that somebody turns out to be Mikhail, and Mikhail, he goes back to his lover, Erica Berger, right? And by the end, Elizabeth sees them together, and she doesn't have a temper tantrum, but she gets upset. Actually, she doesn't really know how to react. She doesn't really know why she's so upset. She doesn't know why she is upset at Mikhail, which shows just how, lacking she is in certain areas. She's talented, she's a genius at computers and hacking, but when it comes to other people, she really has absolutely no clue, right? And this ending was, of course, a bit infuriating because Mikhail, he wants to spend time with her. Mikhail sees Elizabeth as a friend, as a, comrade. He cares about her deeply, right? He admits that he is not in love with her, but he cares deeply about her, and for some fucking reason, Elizabeth just cuts him off completely and doesn't want to have anything to do with him. She's angry at him for some fucking reason, right? And this left a bad taste in my mouth. I was like, I understand why this is. I understand her circumstances, but at the same time, I'm like, bitch, you better straighten up, right? Which is unfortunate because I like her character. I like her deeply as a character, as a person, and this ending, how she just fucking basically tells Mikhail to fuck off and leave her alone. Actually, she doesn't really tell him much. It's unfortunate, right? If it were me, okay, listen. If it were me in Mikhail's shoes and she treated me like this, I wouldn't be this patient. I was like, oh, okay, you know what, bitch? Fine. See you later. Actually, see you never. And I would, go on with my life. Because I don't have the patience. Mikhail, you can say whatever you want about him, but he has patience. He is, a kind, sympathetic person to a certain degree, right? And he tolerates a lot of shit from Lisbeth because he understands that she is a special case, right? But I guess that Lisbeth is so angry is because she assumes that Michael chose Erica because Lisbeth, is a freak. Because Lisbeth assumes that she's a freak, and she assumes that everybody else sees her as a freak, right? And then I guess this in her head is a betrayal on Mikhail's part. I don't know why this is so infuriating. Is because she doesn't even know what she wants. She doesn't even know what the problem is. But she's angry, and she just tosses Mikhail aside like trash, and that's it, right? Right? Stieg Larsson does such a phenomenal job with her character, right? He is a master at showing real, I don't know, mental illness, emotional problems, trauma, you know, uh, you know, people. Lisbeth has hang-ups. She has obstacles. She is lacking in certain areas. And because of this, because her childhood was, fucked up, she didn't have the chance, the opportunity to learn all of the basic skills, to live, in society among people, I guess. And because of this, she is missing certain quintessential ingredients for her to be a whole person, for her to be complete. And because of this, she makes the unfortunate decision to abandon Mikhail, right? And, it's understandable. This is why Larsson is so masterful, because even us as the readers, we're so conflicted by this. On one hand, we understand why she arrives at this decision, but at the same time, we're fucking pissed off because she doesn't even know what the fucking problem is. She doesn't even know what she wants with Mikhail. She doesn't know why she's fucking upset, right? But we understand why. But at the same time, we're pissed off at her. But we understand, right? It's masterfully done. Okay? This book is not the greatest book ever. It's not the greatest page turner. Somehow, Stieg Larsson manages to keep you reading, manages to keep you invested. The reveals at the end, they're not top tier God level, but they're still holy shit, right? It could have been better in some aspects, right? I would have loved to see more twists and turns, more crazy revelations. I wanted to see a fucking massive conspiracy that's fucked up and grotesque. But anyway, it's still out of this world, fucked up and dark, right? And just as a little remark, I've watched the two movies, the Swedish and the English versions, and they're pretty good. They're pretty good. You know, you're hooked, page after page, chapter after chapter. There are a few critiques here and there that I've mentioned. Overall, it's a wonderful read. I would have loved I would have loved to see some of the things that I've mentioned, right? I would have loved for Harriet's disappearance to have, larger ramifications. I would have loved all of these main plot lines to somehow congeal into this, absolutely astonishing conspiracy. But it didn't. It didn't. But it was still massively enjoyable, right? And that's about it. I've already, like I said, I've already started reading the second book, and I hope that, from what I hear, it keeps on getting better. So I'm hooked. I'm ready, right? But a little, and I'll really end this video with this. It's such a tragedy, you know. Stieg Larsson, he just wrote these 3 books, and he gave these 3 books to the publisher, and soon after he had a heart attack and died at the age of 50, and he never really got to enjoy the success that these books had, because these books were fucking popping off. Okay, and it's a tragedy, right? It's a tragedy because, I'm a writer myself, and I haven't had success yet, but to find out about Stieg's life and what he went through, it's sad. It's sad, right? It's just sad. And from what I understand, he planned to write 10 books of this Millennium series, right? So can you imagine the type of, I'm absolutely sure, based on this book alone, that if he continued to be alive, I'm certain that he would have written a masterpiece of a series. We only got 3 books, but I know for sure, based on this book alone, based on this quality alone, I'm sure that he would have written a fucking genius series of books. And who knows what he would have done with all of these characters, right? Especially with Lisbeth and Mikael, who knows? I understand that somebody took over, and another 3 books were released, I guess. An Eye for an Eye, The Girl Who Died Twice, A Tooth for a Tooth, whatever. I'm not a fan of reading series that were continued by other authors. To me, no matter how good they are, a bit of the quality is lost, because from what I understand, Larson only had, summaries, and, basic summaries of what he wanted to write. He planned, these 10 books, he had the basics down, right? But he didn't have, like a major blueprint, right? I don't think that I'll continue reading after, The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, okay? And also, and this will be it, I have a slight complaint. This book is all about violence against women, men hating women, and throughout this book, you get, statistics like, 18% of Swedish women get, threatened by men. 20-something% of women get abused by men. 80-something% of women get, sexually assaulted by men, and they don't report it, right? And, of course, it's not fair, and I don't want anybody to assume or interpret that I'm, misogynistic or sexist, but it's not fair, because he should have said, this percent of Swedish women get, threatened by this percent of Swedish men. You just can't say 8% of women get abused by men, period. It's not even Swedish men. It's basically just men, right? And this leads to the assumption that men in general are just, abusers and violent and savages and brutes. And it's not the case. Of course, a lot of men are this way, but not all of us are this way. And this is what I want to say. He should have added the percentage of male abusers. You just can't say, you can't be so specific about the women victims and not be specific about the percentage of male abusers. Okay? This percent of women get abused by this percent of men. You gotta be fair. You gotta be equal. You just can't say men, period. Okay? Because, if let's just say somebody that's impressionable will read this book, he or she will assume that, generally speaking, Swedish men are fucking, monsters, right? Which I'm sure is not the case for every single Swedish man, right? So, the fair solution should have been that Larsson should have said this percentage of women get mistreated by this percentage of men, period, right? Fair, equal. How many men abuse how many women, or vice versa. You just can't be so specific about the victims and not be specific about the percentage of the criminals, right? Because otherwise it's to assume that men in general are, fucked up sickos and perverts. And they just love violence for no reason. And especially violence against women, because apparently a lot of men hate most women, right? Be specific, on both sides. Put the percentage on both sides, both male and female, to be fair. This is the work of a journalist with integrity, okay? And this is just a little pet peeve, okay? I hope nobody is offended or takes this seriously. But all I'm saying is, we have to have fairness and equality, okay? If you want to write a book about something that has to do with percentages, be specific about the percentages on this side and be specific about the percentages on this side. You just can't say that 8% of women get beaten by men, period, in Sweden. No. You should have said 8% of women get beaten or threatened by, 12% of Swedish men. See, that's fair. That's just. But it's just a little pet peeve of mine. Okay? If you enjoy these videos, if you want to support your boy, I got a few books of my own on Amazon. The link will be down below. Thanks for watching. Keep on reading. See ya.